Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of All Things IDA. Today we're going to be talking about large language models and how we can use this technology with IDA. We will be first covering how to use the large language models, GPT and so on manually, how to reason about those tools. Then we will look at what exists already for IDA, and then we will also introduce something new as well we can work with later on. Okay, so let's get started. While keeping it practical, let's cover large language models real quick. So we can think of a large language model as a neural network that have been trained on millions or even billions of parameters. And mainly the training data is large corpus of text and potentially code of different languages and so on. And at the end of the day, what we get from the training once we have the model is just a probability distribution over its vocabulary. So we can think of as like it will basically complete what comes next. And we can fine tune those models to be specialized in certain completion and certain behaviors and so on. So what we'll be working with is ChatGPT in particular, and we can use ChatGPT 3.5. It's not as smart, and ChatGPT or the GPT-4 model, which is smarter, and we have limitations basically. So let's, before talking about them in the UI, we can quickly look at the models here. So what we see in the UI, GPT 3.5, we're going to be working with GPT 3.5 Turbo. This model has 4K token maximum, and its training data is a bit old. And recently, just a few days ago, they released this one with 16 kilobytes max tokens. So those will, when we talk about context is and the tokens, it's just like the memory of the model, how much text input and output we can give it and get back before it starts forgetting details and so on. Let's see if we can take a quick look at the pricing. For example, GPT-4, depending on, now we don't have access to 32K context yet. It costs 0.03 per 1K tokens for the input token and this much for the output token. So GPT-4 is clearly very expensive. So that's why we would have, we could see, for example, GPT-3, and here it's way cheaper. So GPT-3 Turbo is way cheaper, and 16K even bigger context is as well still affordable. So in the UI of ChatGPT, we have those two options mainly. And here we can start to interface with it by starting a phrase and expecting a response or a completion. So how can we relate this to IDA? So for example, let's suppose we're reversing something. We have some pseudocode and we don't know what that pseudocode does, for example. So what we can do, we can just try to, let's say, copy everything and formulate a prompt. So the prompt is the input we give it. And so we can say here, let's say, please explain what the following C function does, for example. We just paste the compilation. And then hopefully if that model is smart enough, it has been trained and whatever capabilities it has, it should at least save us some time and give us some highlights. Now we can see what's happening here. It's explaining, it's doing this, it's doing that. But what happened is our first question gives it a context, like what are we talking about? So first thing, the most important thing is to give it something to reason about. And that input will consume tokens. So all of those, a token is approximately four characters. So we have a certain limit. If we copy the whole pseudocode of the whole program, today with today's technology, we cannot just directly work with it in a big piece. We might want to send it in pieces and do some tricks and so on. So this is the response. And also from this response also counts towards the token limit. And that with respect to using the APIs, essentially. So if we're programmatically doing this back and forth, we might quickly hit the token limits. And that's why the 16K new model is interesting, because it ups it up. We can have a longer conversation. So when we asked about this function, we got some answer, and then we can now continue the conversation. So for example, some of the classical example is, can you give, can you guess the meaning of the A1, A2, A3, etc. variables, and maybe propose better names? We can talk to it naturally like this. And here we're also trying to have it reason deeper about the code by asking it more specific questions. And for example, here it thinks that argument 1 should be local identifier, argument 2 should be this, and so on. And notice when I formulated my prompt, I did not specify A4, A5. I just naturally specified just, hey, you know what, that's the gist of it. That's what I want, essentially. Try to figure it out. And so on. And so that's how we can use ChatGPT for those things. Now imagine you're working with some archaic database, archaic architecture. It's going to be the same story. You copy the disassembly or the pseudocode. So let's try to copy some disassembly, for example. Let's try it out, see how we can do the same principle on disassembly. So let me pick some relatively small function, not too big. Let's say this one, Alt L, and I'm gonna copy it all the way here. Let's start a new prompt, and since I copied the assembly, I can say please explain this x64 assembly text from Windows 10 kernel 32. And even with this form, it's unstructured text, it should be able to reason about things. And again, it is doing its stuff and so on. I can already start formulating a follow-up question. Can you attempt to convert it to C pseudocode, for example? And we can try, why not? I'm gonna stop generating here and follow up with this question. And let's see what comes out. So really, your imagination is the limits. And notice we're not working with IDA. All we did is we just took some input from IDA and we're reasoning about it. And here we go, we have some form of decompilation. Let's see the same one if we actually invoke IDA's decompiler. Let's see how close they look. So indeed, they do look close, honestly. A bunch of local variables, a couple of even cleaner code, I would say, not like a nested, lots of nested ifs. So you got the idea how we can use ChatGPT. I could have done the same with another LLM. For example, I could have used BART. Same story, let's pick some random function and ask BART. Now, the capabilities of the models might vary. So Let's try to take this and see. Now, the more context you give, the better. And you can always refine your prompt back and forth with the chat. Look, already we have hit the limits. Like, it's too big of a function. So let's pick something smaller. So again, this is the context kicking in. Okay, let's see this one. And see if that works. Okay, great. Okay, this one fits. Let's see what Bart can reason about this function. So here we go. It did indeed give us a lot of stuff. And again, we can continue talking to it back and forth, back and forth. Maybe also, let's say, give better names to local variables and show me the new code. Let's see. Okay, let's see now. Same story like ChatGPT, great work. So again, I'm just showing you the technologies we have and how we can best use it. If it didn't work, it's fine. We can try to change the prompt. We can try another LLM until we get what we want. So now let's transition to tooling. There is already an existing tool that does part of the automation that we have been doing by hand. So it's called Gepetto. So what this plugin does, all it does, its goal is to basically copy the pseudocode on your behalf, pass it to ChatGPT. There are two modes of operation in this plugin. There are the explanation, and there is the renaming integration. So explanation, let's take a look at the explanation part. So here, this is a function. I don't know what it does. It has a dummy name. I want to save some time. Right click and invoke the plugin, and we can say explain. So Control-Alt-G, Control-Alt-G. And here you can see it is sending it to the GP3 Turbo model. Now this is an older model. It might not be smart enough. It has its token limitation, but it's cheaper and so on and so on. So there are trade-offs. Remember the table I showed you. You can always configure it to use a smarter model. So for example, GPT-4, but it's more expensive. Now it sent the request and we got the result back from the plugin. If we scroll up, we see here what it did. It came back with this new comment to the function and this text. Now where did this text come from? You guessed it. When we right click and say explain function, it grabbed the decompilation, wrapped it in a question, say, hey, please explain to me what this does, send the question and parse the output. So now we look at the code. I'm not going to explain the whole code in details, but quickly looking at the code, we can see here they're querying the model and asking, can you explain what the following C function does and suggest a better name? And then they put the decompiled output as a text, and they wait for it to finish. When it finishes, they add the comment here. So here, this is the completion callback. And then they try to parse the response and add the comment response, whatever the response came back, plug it back in. The second feature of this plugin is right click and rename variables. Now this one is gonna be asking, hey, I have those local variables. Can you try to suggest another name? And if so, give me the result in a JSON table so I can parse them programmatically. Here, analyze the following C function, suggest better variable names, and reply visualization array. So these are very important prompts. So the prompts really dictate the behavior of the large language model. And they again form a single query, so they start fresh, and they ask that question, hey, that's the C code, that's what I want you to do, emit a JSON dictionary with a before and after, and when we're done, we're gonna rename them. So once they get back the dictionary, they simply go over all the variables and they rename from the old name to the new name, basically. That's it. So they're using a helper method. We can quickly take a look at the helper method. So rename lvar, which basically is a recent method that renames variables. So really what they're doing here, let's run it and see what happens. So the purpose is the whole pseudocode is sent and the LLM should reason about the local variables. Now, we didn't teach it anything. It should know how to parse the code. And then it will send back JSON. The code will parse the JSON and rename programmatically. We can see everything here is hard-coded, basically. We want to search for the JSON body. We want to parse what's inside and so on and so on. So if we want to add a new method, it's going to be challenging. Every method is different parsing and text prompting and API calling. So right click and let's rename. And now again, the request has been sent. The model is thinking about it. Once the response is back, the rename will happen using IDA's rename lvar API. All right, it finished, and look at this. We have all those variables nicely renamed. And the plugin itself is simple. The brains is the capabilities of the large language model. So when I saw Gepetto the first time, I was happy that it's cool and so on, but I was a bit disappointed how simple it was. And I'm not criticizing the plugin. I'm just saying that what about doing something more? I want to interact with the code. So I want to start with, hey, this is the code. And now let's ask questions. Maybe I don't want to even touch the code. I want to maybe just query it, explain, ask about certain pieces of the code, maybe later ask for certain questions and take action like rename things and so on. But the most important demand I wanted is the ability to conveniently keep the conversation flowing with the session, basically. And that's where back around February, March, I got this idea about something called Ask IDA. So Ask IDA is going to be a plugin that integrates with IDA, also brings the intelligence of large language models. And that's just the beginning. Maybe later we'll see what we can do. But for now, when Ask IDA is loaded, we will see it here, Ask IDA. And it's still work in progress. But what does it do? Now, Ask IDA is oriented or is I'm trying to keep it more command line based. I don't want to have a lot of right click menus and so on. Keep it chat based, basically. So that's the natural location where something like talking to an AI happens, and Ask IDA or AI as well happens to be a nice name. So what can we do here with Ask IDA? It's still work in progress. I would have loved to run the help method, but I don't have a help method yet. So the first thing is, like if you've used WinDebug and so on, we can use the tilde character to enumerate sessions or contexts. So I hit the tilde. Right now I don't have any explicit context. I'm just at the global context. It has a unique ID which is global and it's number. And we will be referring to numbers to talk to different sessions and switch between contexts and sessions and so on. The dot character designates the active context. That's my workspace. So right now I'm at the global workspace. Since I'm at the global workspace, I can already talk to the AI. Now, the AI, as it stands, doesn't have any knowledge. So as it is like we're talking to ChatGPT. So I can just say, hello. Here, hey, hello, how can I assist you? I can say, for example, can you please explain the code of the function at the current screen location? So basically, when it finished, we asked it, we started with, can you please explain the code at the following function at the current screen location? We were very, very specific with our question. The answer we got is, hey, the code function at the current screen location is this. It emitted this pseudocode and explained it, since that's what I asked it to do. Now, going back to the tilt, I'm still in here in the global session, and I asked about this question, this selected function in particular. Now, let me ask follow-up questions, for example. Let's say, what are the command line switches passed to this program? And here, it will reason more about this conversation, and it will say, okay, so that was my question, and here now this is the answer of the AI. Now, this is nothing special in particular. What Ask IDA is doing really is maintaining a chat session. Instead of us copying the pseudocode into ChatGPT or Bard and so on, we're simply using the API to do this from IDA itself. So as long as I'm in the same session, my chat session will remain. Now I will switch to another function and create a new session that will be just for that function. I can switch between two different sessions and talk to different functions at the same time. So we're not done yet. This is my conversation so far at that global session. If I switch away to another function right now and ask the question from another location explicitly and clearly, it will grab the pseudocode and do the same reasoning. But of course, we will have the issue of the context size. So we will hit the memory limitation. So far, I'm fine. This still fits nicely in 16K. I can, for example, see my chat history for session 0. So here I can use the command, the tilde command, session 0 history. And here, this is what I typed so far. Can you please explain the codes? And I listed my sessions, and I asked another question, and then I show the history. Now, let's ask it something interesting, for example. Let's say, can you please emit those switches as Python dictionary, as Python code, as a Python dictionary? Let's see if it will do something about that. And here we go. It emitted Python code with those switches. So imagine now the pseudocode that you're dealing with has some pieces of information that you want to grab and transform. You can do that. We can ask questions about return values, for example. Let's try. How many possible return values are there? Show me the statements. And please, at the end, of course. And let's see what the AI will reason about it. Now, in the future, when newer and smarter models come along, we can simply configure the plugin to work with smarter models. And here we go. It gave me, for example, it returns -1. If the command line arguments less than 2 arguments returns -1. It does this, it does that, and so on. Now, let's try to see, is there a function that plays sound files in this code? Let's see. I don't know, I haven't scrolled. Is there anything that can play sound files? Here it says, yes, indeed. When I looked at the code and I saw this. And this is coming from the training of the model. And that's what the snippet. I could have told it, show me the line number or show me before and after code and so on. Now let's pick some function and work with the new context. So this is the new function. I'm not gonna work with the global context anymore. So I'm here, I'm still in the global context. I'm gonna create a function context. So I'm gonna say /cfunc. With or without an argument, it will pick the current function. So just say cfunc, and it says, all right, now I have a new function context. If I press tilde, it shows me that I am in this context, which is a C function. Now, this special context have more understanding of, like it is prepped to answer certain questions. So I don't have to give it context. Meaning it knows already at this point, it knows the pseudocode. So I don't have to be very explicit. I don't have to say, please tell me what is the code of the function and the address and so on. So I'm going to clear the screen here and just simply say, explain the code, just like that. Now, I did not implement asynchronous calls for now. This is still work in progress. So here it describes the function, what it does, and so on and so on. We can ask now the stuff that Gepetto was doing. So for example, we can ask, hey, any other suitable name for this function? Show it to me, please. Let's see if it can come up with a new name. No, that's not a good name. Any better descriptive name you can give based on the code? Let's see. Okay, so this is much more cleaner, and it says, yeah, a more descriptive name is enable shutdown privilege, which makes sense based on all the function calls. Great, great. So let's clear the screen here and say, great, let's rename the function then, just like that. And here it says the function has been renamed to enable shutdown privilege. Let me refresh the view, and here we go. It renamed it. Now let's do something else. For example, let's reason about the same stuff like we could have done with Gepetto. Let me destroy the names. They are already nice names from the decompiler. So let's get rid of the names and say, let's also refresh the context. And like this, we got a new snapshot of the pseudocode. Now, trust me, if we had unlimited contexts, I would let it run. I will ask for the new fresh information, keep it along the history. But so there's so many issues I'm still working out here. So now we got a fresh context, started over. We're still in the same function. I can go. I can switch back to context 0, so we can go tilde, and then the context number and switch like WinDebug. And I can peek, for example, for the history of the first one, of the first session without switching. And this is my conversation with session 1, for example. So let's go back to 1.0, and now let's say, please locate all the local variables in the code, then rename them to more explanative names. Let's clear the screen and see what happens. Okay, here we got this reply from the AI. This has been renamed to this. All right, let's refresh, and here we go. We got the names. Let's try one more. Let's try this one, last one. So here I have another function. I can see the contexts. I have 2 different contexts. So let's create a context. But this time, I'm gonna directly use the question mark suffix. This will create a new context and directly ask the question, explain the function. So let's clear the screen here and go for it. And the answer is, it takes this. A potential name is initialize mixer. Okay. Rename the function accordingly then. Let's try. So you see how the carrying of the conversation, that's what I want at the end. I want to be able to, for example, select things and ask, hey, what's happening here, and it should work. Okay. All right, so this was a lengthy video, but I think it's important to talk about modern technology and touch upon the large language model topics, and also introduce the Ask IDA plugin, which hopefully will be open sourced sometime soon. Okay, so if you have questions or ideas, please let me know. Otherwise, see you next time. Thank you.